I'm going to be encouraging today that singleness is actually better than marriage. So, it may just be best to just kind of just leave and then come back in later. I don't know, but no. So, obviously, both are good. we praise God. Yeah, and I'm happy for you. That's great. Yes, I am married. Yeah, my oldest daughter got married 2014, and I used that text in their marriage, in officiating. And I don't know if my son-in-law was quite getting it at first, but what I wanted him to do is to recognize, if you wanted to be single and just live your life, even for the Lord, just the best of the best, don't get married, Eric. His name is Eric. Don't get married. But if you're going to get married, recognize the goodness of it and all, but recognize you will be devoting a lot of time to pleasing this woman. That was my point. It's like, don't think your life is yours anymore. I mean, it is acknowledged in Scripture. You will be spending a lot of time thinking about, how do I please this woman? And she too, how to please him. Yes?
Yeah, somebody told my husband one time something to the effect of this is now your ministry. Like, you want to do ministry, but your marriage is your ministry right now. And I'm like, I see you, yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually, we're going to discuss that today a good bit on how husbands will sometimes use ministry to justify the neglect of family, the neglect of wife, and yet sometimes it is necessary to neglect your family for the sake of ministry and for the sake of missions and the gospel. And discerning the difference between the two is challenging. So that's part of our discussion today when I talk about what looks to be, this would be typically a scandalous statement now, because we're trying to, like I said, marriages are hurting, so we're trying to support the family so strong. I will be told many times, your family is your first ministry. If I use it as a chronological thing, yes. If I use it as a logical first, no. Okay? If I forego my family, I am disqualified from any ministry, public ministry. If I'm not raising my children, I'm not, loving my wife, different things. Hey, how do you think you're going to care for God's family if you can't care for your own? So it's a prerequisite. But that doesn't mean, okay, I'm the pastor of this church, but my family's that's my highest ministry. That's not. So anyway, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So it's a tricky thing to differentiate between the two. And so, let's talk the beginning here, because this kind of gets into the rub. Before there's ever any sin, chapter 1 says, God saw and it was good. God saw and it was good. God saw it, and then it ends with, and it was very good, so it's like good, 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 good. And then chapter 2 strikes us as odd that it's not good. Something is not good. It is not good for man to be alone. Is right before chapter 3, the fall of man, before sin. So that which is good is not just some things that are sinless. We're looking for also things to be complete. When God made the world, he made the world incomplete. Hey, thank you.
This is my husband, James.
Hey, all right. We have met.
Yes.
Yes, we have.
I took your class, but it was at the same time as theology, and I'm assisting Mr. Navarro over there.
Okay.
But more than happy to have my wife. She didn't relay everything.
All right, James. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, when God made the world, he made it formless and void. And then he forms it, separating the day and the night, separating the water above from water below, the dry land from the sea, and then he fills it. So it's formless, without void, without form, and it's empty. So that was sinless. So we come into this world, even if there were no sin, we come into this world lacking our complete form and lacking the fullness that he would have from us. Maturing just involves these things, gaining order and gaining a fullness. And so here's a lack. There's a lack in the original creation of God. He created man without the completeness of having woman. And so, you know, he makes, obviously the story is, we'll talk about it at length in a couple weeks, Lord willing, but he makes woman to complement the man. And so that then completes the picture. Of course, it's presupposed in chapter 1 because male and female is in chapter 1. And so the very good does tell us this worked. God's solution worked. And what was lacking here is now fixed. Or you might say supplied, not fixed, like it was wrong. It was just immature or lacking development, full development. What's interesting now is we live in what probably makes Christian family so unique. There's a lot of things we could say Christian vis-a-vis what? Well, the world. You know, what does the world think about family? Wow, they can hardly define it. I mean, really, they can hardly define it, you know. And so, okay, Christian family vis-a-vis traditional Western family, or Christian family vis-a-vis Old Testament family. Now that becomes an interesting comparison because what we see in Genesis is God creating something good on earth, an earthly good. But now that Christ has come, and we now no longer know him according to the flesh, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and we no longer know each other according to the flesh. I don't ultimately know you as, say, American or from South Korea or, you know, something like, you know, Tay has talked about. It's like, ultimately, we're Christians. We belong to Christ. We belong to a new humanity that's a part of the beginning of a new creation. So what makes a Christian family unique then, if we say, it's not just that it's not worldly, it's not pre-Christ, it's part of the last days. We're now doing family in a time period where we're about ready to usher in changes that will lead ultimately to a new heavens and new earth. So what does that look like doing family now? That's the question I really want to press in this morning, because we don't just have, you know, like, I'm just not Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob with my, you know, kind of my patriarchal family and my big tents and flocks and, you know, kind of like settling into the land and saying this, I could be raptured out of this land at any moment. So what happens then when you try to do family in that kind of a context? Do you understand what I'm saying now when I say Christian family? Because in the New Testament, singleness is held up as a good. John the Baptist isn't married. Jesus isn't married. Paul runs around, you know, maybe he's married once. People speculate, quite possible. But he's not married when he's doing his apostolic work, even though he says he has the right to. And then Paul commends it. And so what does that look like then when we live in a context where singleness is held up as a good? Yeah, Daniel?
Would you say that we don't understand the family portion of church because we don't understand family in the first place anymore? Like in America. So like the substitute is kind of what you're saying, right? I think.
I think.
Is that the connection that we need to a wife is actually the connection that we can have with the church now?
I do think so, in the sense like, well, who's my sister, who's my brother, who's my mother? Jesus said, those who do the will of God. There's a heightened sense now of you are all brothers, and now the Christian family, brothers and sisters in Christ, then fulfills the statement, it is not good to be alone. It's still not good to be alone. It's not like God's looking for, you know, Lone Ranger Christians and mavericks and, you know, just hermits to go live somewhere. It's not good to be alone. But now we have actually a higher solution, because I don't just have my family, I got God's family. And so that throws in something different as well in church history. So in the history of the church, singleness was actually idolized for a good millennium, for 1,000 years. It was like if you got married, it was almost like you're not holy. And, where being single was like the thing, to be a monk, to be a nun. And so the Protestant Reformation 500 years ago pushed hard on that, rightly so. And the most classic case was when a 42-year-old Augustinian monk named Martin Luther broke his monastic vow on purpose and married Catherine von Bora, and they went on to have 6 children. And I think he did right to break it, because it was a vow that was predicated as if this is what will save you. So in a sense, it was like an idolatrous false religion, so to break that was actually renounce a false religion, in a sense. You follow me? So I don't think it was like personally, but wow, that's a pretty strong, bold move. But the Protestant Reformation affirmed the Christian family against the idolatrization of singleness leading up to that point. But now, we do have to realize that there is actually something to be said for singleness. So, question, Tay? Okay. So I would like actually for us to, we're going to read 1 Corinthians 7. We just need the text. There's one-stop shopping on this almost. I mean, it is the topic of 1 Corinthians 7. And so it would not be right to discuss this at length without having the words of Scripture in our mind. So, First Corinthians chapter 7. Now, do you guys use ESV here? Is that what do you use? Do you have any version that you use at Hope? What's that?
Pretty much ESV, yeah.
Okay. I don't have the ESV, so.
All the Bibles that are here in church are ESV, I believe.
Okay.
But like everybody, a lot of people bring their own Bibles with different translations.
Okay. Well, sometimes I have the New American Standard, and it's close to the ESV. So sometimes it's helpful to follow the ESV and hear a different version, and then you can notice where interpretive decisions were made. And that's helpful if you don't know the Greek behind it, to recognize translators had some decisions to make here. That's good to know. So I will read it in the New American Standard. It is lengthy, so bear with me. And may the Lord bless the reading of his word. Now, concerning the things about which you wrote, topic number 1. It is good for a man not to touch a woman. That was apparently what the Corinthians wrote Paul claiming. And he's got several of these the rest of the book. So he's going to say yes, no to this. Yes and no. So his answer is, but because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. The husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. The parity, the equality of this text is remarkable, because this is the apostle that speaks of headship in the home, of male leadership, but when it comes to regular marital relations, this is parity, that the authority of the over whose body belongs to the spouse, and there's no qualification like more to the man, less to the woman. No, nothing. It's just there's parity here. So, because of immoralities, there should be regular marital relations. Verse 5, stop depriving one another. That was probably the claim. It's good for a man not to touch a woman, and they're married. is what the claim is probably going in. And so he's like, stop depriving one another unless or except by agreement for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayers, literally plural, so seasons of praying, worship services, but then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you again because of your lack of self-control. So mutual agreement, again, the spouse has veto power on this. Is that because the authority of the other person's body belongs to the spouse. And so there can be a suspension of regular marital relations only by mutual agreement. And so that's important to note. But this I say by way of concession, not of command. It's like Paul's conceding this because actually he would prefer, verse 7, yet I wish that all men were even as I myself am. However, each man has his own gift. Charisma has his own gift from God, a graciously given gift, one in this manner and another in that. Please note, singleness and marriage are both gifts. One man has gift here, one man has his gift here, and both are gifts. But I say, and now he's going to go through, if you look at several of these texts go through, like verse 8, he's got unmarried and widows. Verse 10, he's got married. Verse 12, to the rest. Verse 25, virgins. And then verse 39 goes back to a wife who then is about to lose her husband. And so he's got categories of people. So verse 8, but I say to the unmarried and to the widows, so these are divorced apparently, and those who lost due to death, that is good for them if they remain even as I, single, but if they do not have self-control, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn, with passion presumably. But to the married I give instructions, not I, but the Lord, that the wife should not leave her husband, but if she does leave, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and that the husband should not divorce his wife or leave his wife. But to the rest I say, not the Lord. I say, not the Lord. In other words, you can't find this teaching in the Gospels. That if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he must not divorce her. And a woman who has an unbelieving husband and he consents to live with her, she must not send her husband away. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified through her husband, believing husband. For otherwise your children are unclean, but now they are holy. Yet, if the unbelieving one leaves, let him leave. The brother or the sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? Only as the Lord has assigned to each one, as God has called each, in this manner let him walk. And so I direct in all the churches. Was any man called when he was already circumcised? He's not to become uncircumcised. Has anyone been called in uncircumcision? He's not to be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing. Uncircumcision is nothing. What matters is keeping the commandments of God. Each man must remain in the condition in which he was called. Were you called while a slave? Do not worry about it. But if you're able also to become free, rather do that. For he who was called in the Lord while a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who was called while free is Christ's slave. You were bought with a price. Do not become slaves of men. Brethren, each one is to remain with God in the condition in which he was called. Notice, this middle part repeats that. Christianity is not a social revolution. It's really interesting. It comes into a society, it spreads into a culture, and it's not to overturn the social institutions. It's not to like, yes, if there's some that are better, if you can become free, gain your freedom. But if you're a Jew, basically don't seek to be uncircumcised. You know, if you're a Gentile, don't seek to become a Jew. It's like, don't become circumcised. It's nothing. It's trivialized now. Kosher is out. All foods are clean. It's all what they call adiaphora, in the indifference. So your socioeconomic status of freedom or slavery, your ethnic status, these are things that Paul's like, don't worry about it. You know, just, you are who you are. It's okay. So then he launches into what is our key text for tonight. This part here, towards the end of the chapter. Concerning virgins, I have no command of the Lord, but I give an opinion. That's good to recognize we have freedom here. The apostle is not binding anybody's conscience. He's just, there's freedom here, but I'm gonna talk wisdom talk now. I give you an opinion as one who by the mercy of the Lord is trustworthy. I think that this is good in light of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? This would be engaged. Remember, he's talking to virgins. Are you bound to a wife, so you're betrothed or engaged? Do not seek to be released. Are you released from a wife? Do not seek a wife. That's his opinion now. Not binding anybody. But if you marry, you've not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Yet, such will have trouble in this life, and I'm trying to spare you. But this I say, brothers, that the time has been shortened, so that from now on those who have wives should be as though they had none, and those who weep as though they did not weep, those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who make use of the world, or who use the world, as though they did not make full use of it. For the form of this world is passing away. But I want you to be free from concern. One who is unmarried is concerned about the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. And his interests are divided. The woman who is unmarried and the virgin is concerned about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and spirit. But the one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. This I say for your own benefit, not to put a restraint upon you, but to promote what is appropriate and to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord. But if any man thinks that he is acting unbecomingly towards his virgin daughter, and by the way, this section is really hard to understand. Is it a man giving away a virgin daughter, or is it a man going to marry a virgin lady? For our point tonight, we don't have to decide, because all we need to recognize is there's freedom here, because he's going to emphasize freedom. Let's take it the way the NSB takes it. They take it a man has a virgin daughter. Okay. If any man thinks that he is acting unbecomingly towards his virgin daughter, if she's past her youth, and if it must be so, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin, let her marry. But he who stands firm in his heart, being under no constraint, but has authority over his own will, and has decided this in his own heart to keep his own virgin daughter, he will do well. So then, both he who gives his own virgin daughter in marriage does well, and he who does not give her in marriage will do better. So you have two decisions here. One is well, and one is better. A man is bound as long as her husband lives. A wife is bound as long as her husband lives. But if her husband is dead, she's free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But in my opinion, she's happier if she remains as she is, and I think that I also have the Spirit of God.
Andy.
An inspired opinion. How's that? An inspired opinion. That's not the way we normally hear apostles talk, right? What an interesting section, isn't it? So tell me, what are some of the advantages of remaining single? Undivided attention. Single is better. Undivided. What else? What else do we see here?
You might be more devoted to the Lord without distraction. Well, I guess that would be undivided attention.
Okay, let's add without distraction. Let's add that. Okay.
There's a time dynamic I feel like that she was sort of getting at. It's like, yes, you're undivided, but there's literally a whole bunch of time.
Okay. So attention, and then there's kind of like freed up time. Because if you're single, then there's not only is your mind free, I think it's like worry free. I think the word actually is like worry or concern. Am I right? Megan, you got a word there for us?
It says the betrothed woman is anxious about.
Yes, anxious. Isn't that interesting? There's like, so I might call it worry free because it says anxious. So there's a mental thing here, but then there's also an external thing here, is that externally there's just a lot of more time available.
In 34, it said like they're both anxious.
Yes,
But
one is-
yeah.
One is anxious for the work of the Lord. The other one is anxious about
Oh, okay. So we can't say worry free, worry halved. I'll make a new term up, okay? At least we only got anxiety or worry in one direction, like being concerned for the Lord, but not like ripped apart. I gotta please her, but I really want to please the Lord. And anybody in married life knows exactly what this is like at various times. They're like, I just want to go home right now and just devote myself to prayer. I mean, I'm just like, it's been a day. I just want to burrow into prayer. And the spouse is like, hey, let's pop some corn. Let's sit back and relax a little bit. And you're like, not wanting to relax. It's just, my head pastor, he didn't get married till like age 33. But when he was single, he would like spend all these hours worshiping. As a single man, just worshiping on Friday night, just worshiping. I dare say as a dad, husband of 10 years, dad of 3, he's not just spending every evening just worshiping the Lord with his guitar. It's not happening, Anything else? Yes, Tice.
the way he writes it seems that the single person has more self-control than the married.
Okay.
Seeking to be married.
As he envisions somebody who should be single, right? I mean, self-control. Are you talking like self-control in all areas of life or more just the physical? On the physical, yeah. When the person he's advising to be single is one that has their passions under control, yeah. And if that's the case, he's pretty much green light. You go for God. You just be devoted to Jesus, And so we'll put self-controlled.
What are your thoughts on 27 where he says, are you bound to a wife? Is there some sort of, I think we're mentioning all these things like undivided attention, etc., but like the ability to just get out and leave. Bound, like you're wrapped into a location, a place, and time, you're a little bit stuck.
I think in this case, he's saying you're legally bound, like they're engaged or betrothed. So don't break it off just because you became Christians now. Yes. So this is a good word for Tim and Tice over here. It's like,
stay. But even in that, then you can't just decide to do something different. Versus a man who is single could decide later that he should marry or it's a good time, like Martin Luther did. Mm-hmm. Anyways, that's a thought like you get if you do it really early in life. Like my sister wanted to get married really early and did it 19. and it's like now she's divorced, and like
Oh.
it's just really, it's kind of interesting. But he does mention that the binding. I'm just noting.
The word occurs like 3 different places in the chapter. It's but I'd have to look in the Greek because I don't think they're always the same word. But
a legal, for instance, maybe would be like contracts. Like in life, the less things you can sign, I just feel like the better.
okay.
Because I look at myself like a little bit, so it's like I just prefer that, and I think that's just you're freer to do and to move and to be.
Are we all in agreement singles are more free to be and to do and to be in that regard? They don't have to check with the spouse like, hey, can I just go to Chicago this weekend? I'm really interested in the Field Museum, you know? It's like,
And that's a little bit what I mean.
You know?
You're kind of stuck in.
you are. Your interests are divided. Even if you think what the Lord wants, you better check with your spouse, you know? So it happens. It's so true. It's so true. So how about verse 29? No, which is verse 26. Tim?
I was going to ask you about that one because it seems like this entire everything that follows is predicated on that understanding of some kind of trouble and what that could be.
Mm-hmm.
What distress is he talking about?
Right.
Is that for the Corinthians or is that for us?
Well, that's a great question. At the very least, it would seem like if times are hard, persecution, for example, you know, if times are really hard, that it would be even compoundedly difficult to be married. You know, because now if I were to go to jail as my witness for Christ, what about my daughter, my son? What about my family, right? John Bunyan went to jail, the famous Baptist preacher from the 1600s, author of Pilgrim's Progress. His blind daughter, Mary, was left without his help. You know, so that is heart-wrenching. You know, that really puts it challenging. So in light of the present distress, if that was the kind of distress, we're not just talking about just generally hard times, you know, but like it's persecuting times. You know, you may need to flee. You may need to, well, it's going to be a lot easier if you're just single. Does that make sense? So, but if it's more general, in that Paul says something like, in the last days, difficult times will come. Men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, lovers of pleasure. I don't know if I can describe 21st century America better. Lovers of self, lovers of money, lovers of pleasure. What is, you know, what kind of a cult? And Paul calls that difficult times. Well, in light of those times, it may also be, now this is opinion. The reason why I think this is helpful is, let's just say it's broad, or even let's say it's narrow. In one sense, it's like, at least I'm going into it open-eyed, not kidding myself. I'm going into it with realistic expectations, you know? So like, if I'm gonna go into this and I'm gonna have a family and raise a family in this society where they can't even tell if boys are boys and girls are girls, and if marriage should be this or that, and everything's just fluid, and then like this, and like, if I'm gonna raise a family now, there's gonna be some challenges for bringing them up in the Lord. Am I ready for that? Am I willing to do that? Because Paul's not going to say somebody's sinning by marrying, but I think he is at least saying, let's just be realistic. There's some difficult times that we're living in. There's some stresses. And kind of like a dad looks, is like, you know what? I'd like your life to be a little more freed of those kind of concerns. You know, so it's my opinion, just stay single. Some of you can't. You know, he talks about that. But if you can, again, the self-controlled, stay single. But then he turns around and doesn't he say, I think he says, verse 28, but if you marry, you have not sinned. This has always been one of those interesting things to me. This passage is my go-to for young adults who grow up with an optimizing conscience. Like, if life is a chessboard, and if I don't make the exact right move, like God's got this, It's got the perfect choice out there, you know? If I don't make the exact right move, that was the right move. The one that optimizes everything, that was the best. If I choose just good, somehow I sinned. You know, so there's the menu, and there's this wonderful salad that like has everything in it, and then there's this greasy burger. And you chose the burger. You did not choose the healthy option. You know, that would have been better. But it was still good. Some of us in the room maybe have a conscience where it's like we feel guilty if we don't choose the better. And maybe we even find out later, oh, that would have been better. But you chose good. You didn't sin. So this is what's interesting, the way Paul's reasoning. I'm tempted to show of hands. I want to see your hands. How many of you have a conscience that's like, if naturally, maybe you've grown in Christ where you don't follow, but naturally you're prone to like, if I don't choose the best, I chose wrong.
Even as younger.
Okay, younger. Okay. So we can, what's that? Still? Okay. This is actually liberating because I reduced my guilt feelings by about half, I think, once I realized this. Otherwise, I was running to the cross all the time with all sorts of things where I realized secondhand afterwards I could have chose better. Now I realize, well, it wasn't sin. I do plenty of sinning, but it's been so helpful to me. So, okay. Are we good? Marriage is good. Singleness is better, and he gives us some of the options on why it's better, okay? Now, some of the rest of the chapter is going to go here, and I need to, yes, Tim?
We're going to make a list of all the reasons why marriage
Why marriage is good?
Yeah, we killed the other one pretty well.
Okay, give me some reasons for this chapter why marriage is good. Yeah, from this chapter.
I don't know if it's in this.
Well, that's,
I think this chapter might be a little on the other side.
it is.
Maybe there's some balance you like to make.
You don't burn if you are, and there are a lot of men who will burn.
Yeah.
So, and you were saying, I think your updated solution, updated solution is in reference to being alone, right?
Yes.
But he references a solution that needs to be had. So there's another solution, which is that sexual drive.
So, and this is a gift. We did say it's a gift. This chapter says it's a gift. This marriage is a gift. Both of these are gifts. So we have, both of these are called a gift. In other words, God is giving you something. He's giving you a gift. You know, so you have a gift of singleness, he's giving you, and then if you get married, you have a gift of marriage. Both are gifts, so that's a praise. I was thinking about this a little bit. 1 Timothy 4, is it 4? 5. Younger widows should get married. And I think it says they long for a family. And I think there's kind of two sides of this. I think for the men, there's a desire, a sexual desire that's like, I want a wife. And he says that at the beginning, because of immoralities, let each man have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. And so there is a sense that helps against the sexual temptations, and there's a lot in our culture. It helps. But I also think part of it also is the desire for family, the yearning for, hey, I want a family. I want a husband. I want children. And so Paul says in 1 Timothy, he actually forbids younger widows to give themselves to Christ. He forbids them because they'll break their pledge, because the desire for family will become too strong and they'll end up getting married. He's being realistic. Even though it's his opinion it would be better if they stayed single. But if they're too young, their desire for family is going to get to them. So I think largely he's envisioning older people here, people like who have been, like he says, widowed, unmarried, different things. I think she would be happier if she remained as she is. But it does speak about it in terms of virgins. I get that, but I think realistically he's looking at predominantly it's going to be some older people, not necessarily younger adults. So could we say, or I'm going to add this from 1 Timothy chapter 5, or long for family. Long for a family. I just counseled a young man, 19 years old. He lost his mother when he was 8. He says, I wish I could go back to those happy days. He's not interested in what normal 19-year-olds are talking about. He finds it really trivial. There is a deep longing in that young man to have a family, an intact family. So I think adding that is good. It's more than just say, I'm having trouble with, some desires or something. I think it can be deeper, both for men and women. I think it can be deeper. Like, I just want a family. And so that's a gift. That's a good desire. It's not a desire like, I want to rob a bank or something. It's like, no, I have a desire for a family, right? That's a good thing. But it's not the best thing. And that's what this.
And that makes it the wrong thing.
Oh.
Sorry.
No, thankfully not.
Yeah, right.
So going back just a second, and then connection it with the singleness is better line, undivided attention.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not burn with passion, which you wrote there.
Mm-hmm.
If you are married and no longer burning with passion, you are less distracted and able to serve the Lord better because you're not distracted by your struggles with sexuality because you've met those needs.
And that's going to be a point we're going to make later, is that for most young adults, marriage is a step towards more love, not less love. In other words, that's a good example. Now that's a lessened temptation, less distracted. Good, serve the Lord.
It opens up a little bit.
It opens up, yeah. And so for most young adults, especially in our culture, they call it emerging adulthood, from age 18 to mid-20s, is the most irresponsible time of life, meaning there's no responsibilities. They leave home. They don't have a family yet. They're not answerable to parents, not answerable to siblings. And so that time period is one psychologist did a huge study on it. It is identity explorations. It is feeling in between. It is self-focused. It is, what was the other two? Is optimistic, because there's no commitments. All doors are open. And there was one other one too that was like, it was a time period I recognize. I work with college students all the time and young adults. I've been working with them for, years. And so it resonated with me. So I think in our culture, marriage actually is, for most young adults, a nice step forward to learning to love somebody. So I'm not putting down marriage on this. I just hope you all are recognizing this.